MeloCat's expert chat. Upgrade your cat's lifestyle.
Welcome to another episode of MeloCat's Expert Chat. This is a show where we shine a light on the realities of pet adoption, animal care, and of course, rescues. We're talking to experts all over the world. I'm your host, MeloCat, and today we're diving into a topic that is both universally relevant and deeply personal: pet-related scams and fraudulent practices. Here in Asia, we often see scams related to fake adoption listings, hoarding disguises rescue, unethical breeders, or even fabricated online listings for animals that don't really exist. While my own experience is more scammed by a so-called volunteer here in Hong Kong, the issue is widespread. It affects pet lovers worldwide and online as well as offline. These problems aren't unique to this region because if you're following my YouTube channel, my community members from US, from Canada, from Australia, and UK, and other parts of Asia, they also report similar experiences from fraudulent rescues and online pet sale scams and everything in between. Most people only become aware of these scams when they fall victim to one themselves, or say their friends fell into one. But other than that, they don't realize that these cases are just the tip of the iceberg. That's why today's conversation is going to be very important. So everyone, do buckle up, keep your eyes and ears peeled. Now, joining me is a special guest, Stephen. Thank you so much for being with us.
Nice to be here, Melody.
Thank you. Now, just a little bit about Stephen. He's the founder of Stephen Quandt Feline Behavior Associates, LLC, and a feline training and behavior specialist certified through the Animal Behavior Institute, and a recent author with the publication of his first children's book, Happy Comes Home, available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Funny, this is Happy. So the universe actually lined us together. Now, he's a professional feline behavior specialist with over 20 years of experience working with cats in private consultations, animal shelters, and in the field. Now, a background of nationwide rescue work with the ASPCA greatly enriched his empathy with communities of cat lovers in need of help. In the year 2019, he participated in a spay and neuter and research campaign to assist the animals that live in the exclusion zone around the Chernobyl nuclear plant, many of whom are descended from the pets left behind after the incident in 1986 are the ones that he's working with. His current work with the Animal Care Centers of NYC advances that compassionate connection. If you want to know more, please do check him out at www.catbehaviorhelp.com. The American way of spelling it without the U, and at Cat Behavior Help on FB, on IG, and on TikTok. I'll put all of the links in the description. So everyone, please do check them out. Stephen, thank you so much for being on this show. Let's do it, shall we?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Melody, for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Oh, thank you. So to the audience, everyone that's listening, now, you're probably wondering that, how did you go from talking about cat behavior to adoption and to pet scams today? Well, I've been talking about this on and off in the past, but I didn't really shine a huge spotlight on it until the recent years when I noticed that this is actually more prevalent than I thought. For me, I've been scammed by a volunteer in Hong Kong, and I noticed that there's actually a lot of problems present with these scams. It's not just one thing that happens in a vacuum. It actually happens in different forms, but it's more or less the same. So, Stephen, I know that you've done a lot of things with the ASPCA before, and the reason why I wanted to have this conversation is because there's a giant gap. Like, for example, in Hong Kong, we have SPCA, which is one of the very formal and official shelters that we hear about all the time. But frankly, we don't really know too much about what happens behind the scenes in the adoption process from the adopter's perspective, or even just what to expect. What does it mean to go through an official channel? So now that we have you on, would you like to share just a little bit about the stuff that you've done, and what is it like and what to expect when we go to an official channel to adopt?
I should make a distinction. The ASPCA In the US, there are SPCAs all over
Mm.
the country.
Okay.
These are societies for the protection or prevention of cruelty to animals. The ASPCA is the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. It's its own organization. It's a national advocacy organization that also does adoptions in New York City. In any case, I just wanted to make that little distinction. With any organization, if you're what we call a brick and mortar organization, you have a physical location, a physical presence. That is by itself legitimizing because you know they exist. If you go to one of these organizations, they will take you through their own specific adoption process or fostering process. If you want to foster for them, take an animal temporarily. That process will be specific to that organization. It's fundamentally legitimizing because you know you're dealing with a real entity.
Right.
Other organizations that are maybe a little bit more online based, many of which are legitimate. I work and have met many organizations just in the New York City area. They're legitimized in different ways by their presence in the community.
Right.
They work with other organizations that are brick and mortar. A brick and mortar organization like ASPCA or Animal Care Centers of New York City can say, yeah, we know Sean Casey Animal Rescue.
Okay.
And then Sean Casey Animal Rescue or Ready for Rescue, which is a cat and dog rescue group that I consult with, have a physical presence when they go to events. They have a table and a banner, and the host of the event knows they're legitimate or they wouldn't give them a table.
Okay.
Right? Their credentials are essentially verified by another legitimate organization that is the host. And then, of course, these organizations have tax status. They're an NGO. They don't have to pay taxes. And that is something that is conferred upon them by the US government, and that be discoverable. You know, as before we started recording, I gave you a website where you can look up any charitable organization in the US and determine if they are in fact a charitable organization.
Right. Unfortunately, in Hong Kong, I can't say all of because it's not regulated. Anyone can call themselves a cattery or a shelter in Hong Kong. It's not like that in the States, right?
No, I mean, you could call yourself something and you could be a thing, but if you want to be a recognized charity that can obtain funding, you have to go through a process with the government proves that you're doing the work that you say that you're doing. And this transparency is essential for quality control, for having faith that you're talking with a legitimate organization. I cannot, honestly, I'm trying to wrap my head around what it sounds like it exists in Hong Kong. I'd love to hear more because I don't understand not having regulation, not having oversight.
There is, but the line get blurred very fast because it's there. We do have charities here. We do have registered charities. They call them R88 licenses. So it's the same as the 501c3 that you guys have over there. That part of it is the same. But when it comes to what is called a cattery or a shelter, that is where it really blurs. I can actually call my house a cattery and people wouldn't be able to tell. You don't need a certain qualification for that word. And that's where it gets really weird. Same thing with volunteers. You can call yourself a volunteer. Here, a lot of people would assume that there's a certain authority that's attached to it. The first people to think of are the people from SPCA, the staff inside, or their team. Unfortunately, that's not the case.
It sounds like the term volunteer in Hong Kong has a certain authority to it.
Supposedly.
It confers a degree of status and I'm just guessing by the context in which you're discussing it. But if that's true, it doesn't have that meaning in the US.
It is weird, isn't it? These conversations are great because to hear some words that I say, you're like, what? And I hear you saying the same. I'm like, that means something else. Here, I think it's because SPCA has been here for so long, so people can actually remember them as the first places to go to when it comes to adoption. Of course, there's a lot of other shelters that are legitimate as well, but they are probably one of the first and the biggest ones. People remember the shirts, banners, and everything, and then you can actually find them in a physical building. There's multiple buildings in Hong Kong that belongs to SPCA. But that's where people are taking advantage of that, is when people say volunteer, uniformed, holding a clipboard, asking you for addresses, asking for personal information when adopting in a brick and mortar place. These private, not so legitimate ones, not all of them, but a lot of them are. And they would do the same. They would ask for the same thing, hoping that people would blend it together, that it doesn't get questioned. And that's where they succeed. It's insane. So that's why, these scams, it looks the same on the surface one way or another, but then when we dissect it later, you'll be like, okay, yeah, it's the same stuff. So when I was talking about volunteer, a, a lot of times we think of well-intentioned, benevolent people. Most of them are, but it's that 5% that we have to look out for. This is why I think it's important to shine a light on that. Can you share with us over there in the United States? I think you touched on it a little bit. What do volunteers do in a shelter? Who are they?
So organizations like mine depend on additional help beyond just their paid staff. There are people in the community who want to donate their time and care about cats, dogs, and other animals. We at my shelter, actually by law, is required to take every single animal brought to us. Common farm animals like goats and sheep and even a cow on one occasion. We've taken in monkeys, a wallaby, which is a small type of kangaroo.
Yeah.
We took in a full-grown tiger about 10 years ago. You can Google it, Animal Care Centers of New York City, tiger. I'm sure you'll find the story. And I could tell you the story if you want. But in any case, to your question, there are people who want to work with dogs and cats and rabbits and guinea pigs, which are the 4 species that we adopt out. The other animals, the exotic animals or the farm animals, get placed to sanctuaries or to zoos or to farms. But there are people who want to come donate their time. And so we have an onboarding process.
Right.
People apply. They have to go through an application, they have to actually demonstrate that they are interested in doing the work and willing to show up a certain number of hours per month. Then we teach them how to operate and work effectively in our organization with our limitations or with the things that are relevant for them, safety being an important thing.
Right.
Because we have animals that are not always gentle. We have dogs and some cats who could be upset. So we have to make sure our volunteers are protected. We have protocols for that. They go through a process by which we legitimize them. We realize they're serious. We train them. And then they do things like they walk dogs. Our dogs need a minimum of 4 walks a day. And in order to get that, we couldn't do it without volunteers. And we also have cats who their kennels need clean. We have staff that clean the cat kennels, but cats are always doing their thing, and any kennel could be clean one moment and dirty the next. So volunteers help clean them. They provide enrichment. In other words, they play with the cats. They read to the cats and to the dogs so that the cats and dogs get used to hearing human voice. They make physical enrichment. We have different types of DIY toys that we create for our cats. We provide, sound enrichment, lighting, and I love your background, by the way. I wish I had the same behind me. So volunteers do mostly animal care and enrichment for dogs, cats, and rabbits. They assist with adoption events where they go out with our truck. We have adoption vehicles, where they've got the built-in kennels inside the truck.
Yeah.
And they will be the face of our organization in terms of greeting people in the shelter. They also greet the public and kind of direct them to the right thing that they are coming to us for, because not everyone's coming to adopt. Some people come to surrender, some come for medical needs. They're providing basic entry-level care that augments what the staff can do.
Interesting. I was just thinking about what you said. You said you have to make sure that they're safe because some animals are not as easy to deal with as you'd think. How about the safety of animals? Do you vet them to make sure that they have what it takes to keep the animals safe as well? Despite the fact that you said one of the criteria is that they're interested in giving their time, that they have this passion. But my question is, have you actually disqualify people because you're like, okay, you don't have what it takes to do your job as a volunteer. Has that ever happened?
Yes, that has happened. And it's usually because they're not following our protocols correctly and they're putting themselves at risk. We generally don't have to worry about a cat or a dog becoming injured at the hands of a volunteer. Our shelter has at least 50 people in the building at all times, and we probably have at least 50 cameras operating continuously throughout the entire shelter. In any given room, you'll see at least 3 or 4 cameras.
Okay.
There is nowhere in the shelter other than the bathroom where you can go where you're not being recorded. If necessary, they will go to the cameras and look and see what's happened. There was a volunteer who wrote a nasty note.
Okay.
Did not like the way in which the cat kennels had been cleaned that day.
Okay.
They wrote a nasty note and left it behind for staff to find. And of course, staff found it and went to the cameras and found out who placed the note there. Other volunteers who aren't being careful and not following protocol, how to walk a dog safely. When you're walking through our shelter with a dog, every 20 feet, you yell out, "Dog." You let people know that you're coming with a dog, and everyone else stands to the side.
Oh, wow.
Let that dog pass, because you don't know if that dog is reactive to another person, or maybe there are 2 people with dogs, one dog coming this way, one dog coming that way, and you've got to coordinate.
Yeah.
When I was on large scale cruelty cases and disaster cases with the ASPCA, everybody had a walkie-talkie.
Oh, wow.
And when you were walking dogs, you'd say, leaving pen A, heading for play group. And everyone would be coordinating the movement of dogs. If you can't safely operate with a dog or a cat, and you're at risk of having another dog injured or another person injured, then you could be either retrained or potentially dismissed.
Wow. That's something we can all take note of because it's not regulated in here. Is I was saying earlier, we've actually seen a lot of so-called volunteers, people who call themselves volunteer, who in real life, they may not be a scammer, but they're an animal abuser. They're actually a hoarder. Like they say they rescue, but no animals ever come out of their establishment, that nobody knows where it is, that they only see animals going in, but animals never come out. Until you hear a raid, and their place got raided. There's like 200 cats. That's what happens here. It's weird. It's not related to outright scamming, but it's just the fact that they're not fit to do what they're doing, but they're still doing it, and there's nobody to tell them that, hey, this is not right.
For the most part, in my experience in the US, those people avoid legitimate organizations because they want no contact with us. That's the last thing they want, contact with us. I worked on many cases with ASPCA with a group called, at the time, Field Investigations and Response Team. It's now called National Field Response. And we went all over the country raiding. On the outside might look like a legitimate organization, but in fact was a hoarding case. There was a cat sanctuary, right? It was a legitimate sanctuary. It was in Florida.
So at one point, it was legitimate.
A lot of organizations start in a legitimate way, and then they become overwhelmed and they continue to operate well beyond what's called care capacity. Care capacity is not the physical capacity of your building, because you could overstuff your building, right?
Right.
It's how many animals can you care for in a humane and legitimate way. They go over care capacity and they don't see it. They might actually have a mental illness where they don't understand that they're hoarding. This organization, which was called Caboodle Ranch, Caboodle with a K, had, when we got there, a volunteer with an animal rights organization, I think it was PETA, went in and secretly recorded video of this sanctuary that had little houses on the property. Cats could come and go in and out of these little houses. Florida is a warm weather environment, so there was never cold winters. When we got there, there were 800 cats. And that's
How
the
big
ones that were,
was the place?
it was physically relatively large, but there was only one person caring for 800 cats. So you can imagine it took a minimum of 50 of us working 8 to 10 hours a day, every day, just to maintain the basic care for these cats while we triaged, provided medical care, I worked in the medical division of this organization, and I was put in charge of the FIV, FELV ward. FIV and
Yeah.
FELV are both
Mhm.
immunocompromised illnesses. We had about 120 cats who were either FIV positive, FELV positive, or what's called double positive.
Oh, yikes. Wow.
So those organizations try and stay away from us because if we find them, we can shut them down. We also have individuals, and this has occurred in New York City, where people have way too many animals. We did a case where a single apartment in Brooklyn
Mm.
had around 100 cats,
Oh.
including deceased cats. Person had a mental illness, and they were taken out of their apartment for medical treatment, and then we took all the cats out.
Wow, that's insane. In Hong Kong, real estate is very expensive. Most people don't live in houses. So when people say they have a sanctuary, I think people are a little bit smarter about it now that they want to visit it, but not everybody's like that because all we see are the ones that are online or the ones that's in the shop front. So some of these, they're not necessarily catteries. They could be individuals, like they could be just a shop, like maybe just a shop that sells stuff, right? And they have like a bunch of cats and I don't know, like a 50 square feet shop, and there's like 20 cats there. And to the naked eye, people are like, oh, yeah, they're just a shop front that's used to expose the cats that are probably in the sanctuary somewhere else. That's in the suburbs. Oh, yeah, it's just circulating for us to see so that they get exposure. But then if you think about it, it's like, wait a minute, 50 square feet, 20 cats, that's still a lot. But people don't really register because they'll be like, you still need a shop front. It is normal that they're in cages. I'm like, actually, that's not quite normal. And when you ask those places, it's like, where's the cattery? Where's the actual shelter? And most of them don't want to interact with you, or they'll just brush you off. Yeah. So it, like what you said, they don't want to be associated with certain individuals, like how the illegitimate ones don't want to be associated with the official shelters. You see a lot of dodging when people start to ask those. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention is online. That's where it gets easier to actually to scam or deceive anybody. Fake adoption listings, rescue listings on YouTube. We see a lot of the ones where they bust these people on Craigslist or whatever. They're talking about, oh, there's an urgent case that something's happening. Somebody got hit by a car, some puppy. And it turned out it was a picture that's stolen from another rescue, or hoarding disguised as rescue work. I don't know if you actually see a lot of that. They know they're hoarding, but they just keep saying it that way so they could get money online, saying we're overflowing.
Right. There are lots of ways to obtain money and to scam people. I was actually looking this morning at a small rescue in New York City that advertises some of our cats that are at risk. They're long stays. They may have medical issues. They may have behavior issues. Not my personal cats, my organization's cats.
That's what I mean.
We Animal Care Centers of New York is a public organization. And we have cats and dogs who are in dire need of fostering or adoption.
Right.
And they oftentimes go on a special list called the at-risk list. These are cats and dogs who need special placement. There are good-hearted people who watch that list because they want to take animals from that list. They want to do a good deed and provide for a special needs dog or cat. And there are small private organizations that help promote those dogs and cats through their Facebook and through their social media.
Okay.
What they said this morning at one of these organizations, and I know the person who runs it, she said a very interesting thing. She showed the picture of the cat, and there's medical history and behavior history. And what she said at the top of the listing was, do not send me money for this cat in order to help me take this cat out of the shelter unless you see the cat's listing on my official website, not just a Facebook posting, which anyone can do, of course. But if you are the owner of a Facebook account, that's hard to copy that list, that account. It is conceivable that you can clone someone else's account. She said, wait for this cat's photo to show up on my account page before you make a donation on behalf of this cat. In other words, what she was saying was, don't trust me until I prove to you that I am the real me.
Oh, wow.
Because there
That's
could
something
be
to learn
people
from.
impersonating her.
That's actually a really good strategy to learn off of. You're right, because you could just take
Anyone can.
anyone's.
Yeah, right. People clone Facebook accounts all the time.
Mhm.
They copy your photos, they copy your posts,
Mhm.
and they do it for obviously an illegitimate purpose.
Wow. Actually, now that you mentioned it, it reminds me of one that I was listening to not too long ago from a local news outlet. It's a common scam in Hong Kong, but it's not about adopting. It's buying animals. They're breeders. There's two types. They take either real animals or it's somebody else's picture. The somebody else's picture is like what you said, except for it was the purchasing form of it. And that animal doesn't exist. They take a deposit, they run off. That's actually the low level one. The higher level one is they have a so-called rescue and they say, oh, we raid unethical raiders. And whenever we do, we get them adopted out. And we see these WhatsApp messages, these Facebook pages, or DMs that say some poodle or some British short hair breeder got busted, and now we have 50 of them. Anyone is up for grabs. It's free, and you can come get it. The thing is, they said the animal is free, but when you get there, the fees to cover their care, maybe they had medical issues, maybe they had worms or whatever, it's usually in the 5 figures. To give an example, it's like $4,000 to adopt an animal. That's the same as you buying a purebred. So really, they're not rescuing them. They're working with unethical breeders to get rid of the rejects, the deformed ones, the special needs ones, the ones that don't have good colorings or good spots for sales, or the ones that are too old to sell because everybody want puppies and kittens in the shop fronts. So when they become 1 or 2 year old, you can't really do anything with them anymore because they're quote quote not pretty. They're not quote, quote, perfect, and they just get rid of them like that. And then when these adopters thought they're doing something good by adopting, when they look at their bill, they're like, wait a minute, that's how much you're paying if you were to buy an animal. This is not adoption. No shelter is going to ask you for money like that. They're like, oh, but they said it's free. They said they had it for a couple of years. They spent this much on dog food. They spent this much on vaccination. I'm like, even the SPCA only asks you for the microchip or the vaccination in some sort of admin fee at most. Does that mean if you adopt a dog that was in a shelter for, say, 5 years, then it's going to bankrupt you to adopt them because of the amount of money spent, right? So I think a lot of people don't understand that that is not a thing. Do you guys talk about that in the state? What people should pay for or not pay for?
Sure. And, just to give you an example, at my shelter, the most expensive cat would be a kitten, and that's $125.
Involved with or people paying for?
Let me just go through the different fees and then we'll break it down. A cat who's older than a year would be $75.
Okay.
And older than 4 years would be $25.
Okay.
And it's essentially a donation. We provide rabies tags and testing for FIV leukemia, deworming, common vaccinations, rabies, FVRCP, which is a core vaccine.
Right.
We do the spay and neutering. All of that is included in the fee. Kittens are a little bit more expensive because everybody wants a kitten. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And young adults are a little bit less. And then the older adults, we make the lowest possible fee to just help motivate people to adopt a slightly older animal. It works. We're not charging for the amount of food that we fed this cat over time.
The medical treatment,
right? Or the medical treatment. It simply doesn't exist. People would come to us. If you want to spend $3,000 on a cat, you can go to a breeder and get a breed cat. Even if we had a breed cat, and we do sometimes, the fee is exactly the same. $25 if older, $75 if young adult, and $125 if a kitten. Those fees help augment our expenses, which are mostly not recovered. We rely on both government and private donations to pay our operating costs, which are millions of dollars a year.
That's one thing that people were not briefed about here. Especially some of the first-time adopters, they thought that it's the norm to cover for everything that was ever spent on an animal. They're like, yeah, it sounds about right because they don't have money to run their shelter. I'm like, No, usually shelters have some way of making things work, although of course donations are important, but they don't go around charging people like that. That would discourage people from adopting. Here, it's basically the Wild Wild West when people hand you animals to adopt. So the basic ones is that you have netting for the windows that open so the cats don't fall out of apartments because we live in skyscrapers here. That's the number
Right.
one hazard. People don't know cats are flying ninjas and out the window they go. So that's their number one fear. Sometimes they need a home inspection, but some people are quite deterred by that because people are pretty private here and they don't let the fact that people know where they live for good reason. When it's done by SPCA or big shelters, people feel more at ease because they know they're legitimate and not here to take your personal information. They're more comfortable with that. Although it does deter some people who don't want to invite people in their house or have netting because it's it's aesthetically not as pleasing, but they have different forms of those nets. For us, any window that can open, we have those really fine meshes, the stainless steel ones. And sometimes my followers are like, "MeloCat, did you just open your window?" I'm like, no. If you look at it from an angle, there's actually a mesh.
Could you send me and email me some either links or photos of these nettings? Because we ask people to have screens in their windows, and that's a pretty reasonable thing in New York City. There are modern high-rise buildings where the windows open in weird ways, and you can't really screen them. In those cases, we just ask people to be really careful about it.
You guys had window locks or door locks that only let you
it's a
can count
child.
how much it opens, right?
Yes, it's a child lock. In windows that don't just open up and down, we can put in bars to keep children and limit the amount of travel that the window does.
They
That
for
is
balconies. Here, those
Oh,
screens and
interesting.
nettings, they have the really fine ones. And unless you look at it from an angle, it looks like it doesn't exist sometimes. And people are, what are you doing? I'm like, no, relax. I'm going to tilt my phone. So it kind of scares people sometimes because after you watch it, it doesn't look like it's there.
Would like to see that. There is a compromise in the world of home visits that some smaller organizations in New York City do. They used to do home inspections routinely. They would ask the question, would it be okay if we visited your home? And anyone who said no, they would just
Did you say routine initially?
routine. It would be common to ask the adopter, would you allow a home visit? Even if, and that was just a question that they would ask. But the compromise that they've worked out is they do FaceTime inspections. In other words, I don't have to know exactly where you live. I mean, the organization would know because you have to fill out an application, but it wouldn't be someone visiting your home. You could maintain a certain sense of privacy because you're only showing us the inside. You're not showing us on what street you're living.
Yeah, again, with the bigger organizations, people are more comfortable. I actually, now that you mentioned it, if you see a black cat walking around, I almost got robbed because it was a few ladies that found a cat. It wasn't a scheme, but one of the people saw it as an opportunity. She kept wanting to come to my house saying she missed my cat, but she doesn't like cats at all. She mentioned that in the conversation. I was like, why do you want to come if you don't like cats at all? One of the ladies called me one night and she was like, okay, I can't tell you too much. My husband's in law enforcement. But this woman who keeps wanting to come to your house has a history of robbing and assaulting people. I was like, are you serious now? It's like, so please do not let her in your house. It seems really suspicious that she wants to keep visiting you, despite she wants nothing to do with cats. But in conversation, she heard that I live alone. She probably saw it as an opportunity. And it's an easy way to get into people's property by doing home visits or saying, I miss the cat. People are pretty skeptical about it nowadays. And they'd rather not adopt the animal than to actually risk it. Yeah.
I have never heard of that here in New York City. We have organizations that are foster-based rescues. The cats are in people's homes and waiting for adoption. They're not in a physical brick and mortar shelter. They will do the interview with the person over FaceTime or Zoom. Once that's done, they might go to the home to meet the cat. But those are cats that are also listed on the organization's website. So there's a legitimacy there because there's a cross-reference to a legitimate organization. These are cats that are registered with the rescue group and are on the rescue group's webpage. That makes sense.
Is that how most of them are done? If it's done the proper way, no matter where the animal is, they always channel it through the websites of these places to get them exposed as opposed to bypassing it.
Very common in New York City and very common with smaller rescues that don't have a brick and mortar physical presence. They're a legitimate organization and they'll go to events where you get to set up a table and showcase a few cats or dogs. All of their cats are typically adopted through a foster process where the cat is visibly associated with the organization.
Huh. Wow. Only if we have a mechanism like that here.
It's not hard. All you have to do is say, let's say you're a legitimate rescue group, you rescue cats and adopt them out, and you have a web page where you upload photos and bios of your cats. And when someone says, I'm interested in that cat, they fill out an application, right? Which, applications are specific to organizations. Some are very difficult, complicated applications. Some are a little bit simpler, but the basics are you have to prove who you are with some form of government ID, that you have to demonstrate a few other things. And then if you've satisfied the organization that you're legitimate, then they will allow you to meet the cat virtually in this person's home through like a FaceTime conversation. And that's all very easy. You give the adopter the phone number and they call and do a virtual visit that leads to a personal visit and an adoption. It's not complicated.
Safer. It sounds much safer. I would be more willing to go through that process than the ones we see here where it's bypassed. A volunteer can just go up to you and say, I got a cat here. Give me your driver's license. Give me your utility bill. Tell me where you live. I need to come see your house. A lot of first-time pet parents, they actually fall into that trap. And then until these people drop you off the animal, then they think it's okay. But because they have your driver's license and utility bills, they can do a lot. And they extort them. Yeah, they blackmail them or extort them, or they threaten you. If you don't do as they say, they'll threaten you. Sometimes they would even go as far as to give you a contract, but it's a contract that they have to draft. It's not like one of the standard ones that you see in shelters. If you read the fine print, it basically means you're going to pay for everything, but they have access to your place 24/7. And you have to say yes, and they still own the animal. It's crazy. If something happens to them in a year, it's your fault. So you can imagine once people sign that, they just open up doors to be extorted. When these volunteers frequent their house a few times, even the security guards are like, yeah, we've seen that person before. They should be friends. So if things happen, then they'll be like, that's just like a friend dispute. It's like, no, actually, they don't know each other. But then it's hard to explain because they'll be like, if you don't know them, why would they have your full name and your ID card? It's even hard to explain to the cops because it will sound really dumb. But in hindsight, they just fell into a trap.
It conjures up a couple thoughts. There needs to be education on what's legitimate, what's not legitimate. Public awareness of what constitutes standard normal practice, best practices. At the very least, be great for legitimate organizations to spend some time and capital educating the public as to what constitutes a safe and good adoption process. Part of that is advertising. I can imagine an organization like SPCA or maybe a smaller group that's legitimate but smaller saying, we don't come to your home. We list all of our cats on our website, even though that cat might be in a foster home. If someone says that they are a representative of us, they say they're a volunteer and they have 4 of our cats available for adoption. If you don't see that cat on our website,
don't count it. It's legitimate. Right.
Exactly. And by doing that, the organization would be hoping to protect the public. They would be protecting their own legitimacy.
Oh, absolutely. This is where I kind of wish the shelters would at least oversee the differences and still work with each other, but we don't see that kind of synergy here. It's almost like a lot of times you see the shelters are almost like enemies with each other. Sometimes you need to work together with some things, which actually lead, I don't know if you guys have that in the States, but some shelters or even some channels, all you see are the really tear-jerking animals. It's almost like they don't have normal animals for adoption. It's always the ones that tug at your heartstrings big time. Like, do you guys see channels or rescuers that are like that? And usually statistically, it's impossible, right? I mean, you've worked in a shelter before.
You don't see that, in my opinion, in legitimate organizations.
Right.
Perhaps the most common, consistent story that you might see is this is an animal who needs medical care, and it's probably going to cost a certain amount of money. They might even give an estimate. But that's not representative of all the animals. It's a fraction of the animals.
Of course.
There are these organizations like the one I alluded to earlier that was helping to publicize some of our special needs cats. They focus on the special needs cats. So the cats that they're publicizing all seem to have some sort of special need. But again, those cats go back to our website. And even when they're not part of a foster network, they're just at our shelter, even though someone's advertising or the need for that cat to get a home, that cat can still be referenced on our website. Every animal that comes to us is given an identification number. Since we started using this particular database, it's called Shelter Buddy, in 2007, the most recent animal ID numbers have been around 230,000, and they're sequential. So every animal that comes to our attention is given a sequential number, and that's where we're at right now. But you can look up, if you go to nycacc.app, you can look at all of our available cats and dogs. If you look them up by their name or their ID number, and you'll see that even if they're in a foster home, they're on our website.
Interesting. I like that a lot. And also, even if people decide to focus on the special need ones, I think what's important is that there's no pattern of, hey, tear jerking, panic, money right now. Like with most scams, there's always an emotional element and the panic element. There's the urgency, act now or never. And there's always this huge lump sum that they're looking for. That pattern, when it starts to follow that pattern, that's when we should perk up our ears and be like, okay, what do you want?
And then there's a fork in the road. And it's really important that people understand where those two paths diverge, because there are legitimate animals that have special needs and might be expensive in terms of follow-up care. And then there's the organizations that are not organizations at all, and they're not legitimate. When you're looking at an animal that is a sob story, does that animal track back to the legitimate organization's website? That is, say, a brick and mortar website or a registered 501c3, an NGO. And if it does, then that gives it a lot of legitimacy. If it doesn't, then it's not.
And even for the ones that require a lot of money for medical treatment, is it usually the shelter that absorbs that cost as opposed to whoever that like not talking about long-term treatment costs after adoption. At the moment when they're admitted, say a dog got ran over by the train tracks or whatever, if they're not adopted yet, it's usually the shelter that absorbs that cost, right? Or there's some sort of
100% of the time. At least in the US, a shelter will never ask for money to pay for the medical treatment of an animal. It's either absorbed by the organization pre-adoption, or it's placed on the adopter as a condition of adoption and post-adoption. In other words, if you adopt this cat has stage 4 dental disease. It's going to need a lot of extractions, and that could cost you a couple $1,000s. So they'll disclose that because they don't want the person adopting the cat if they're not willing to have that procedure done, because then the cat's just going to suffer with dental disease. Or they're going to return the cat, which legitimate rescues and shelters are always faced with the problem of cats and dogs being returned. And in the United States, the national return rate is approximately 8%. 8% of all dogs and cats come back for one reason or another. And we have never been able to get under that rate. No matter what you try, there are legitimate reasons why people feel the need to return an animal. But we don't want them to have to return the animal because we failed to disclose something.
Of course. Right? Yeah, of course. Yeah, so to mitigate that, I think we just actually touched on something that's very important. Legitimate ones will actually tell you everything up front, the long-term treatment or how expensive it is to treat them down the road. If that's not something you can accept, you can choose to say no right now, as opposed to just drop it in your lap and say, hey, give me some money. That's actually the biggest difference between the legitimate ones and the ones really out for blood. It doesn't make any sense. If you want it for the longevity of the ownership, there's no reason to drop it in somebody's possession and then ask for money after, which doesn't even go to the animal's long-term care, but goes to kind of backdates to what you pay for. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't do anything for the
I
owner.
mean, imagine you're adopting out a cat and you say, I need $500 to cover whatever procedure. And then but you failed to disclose all these other things that are wrong with the cat. They pay you the money, take the cat, discover there's thousands of dollars more to do and return the cat. Then you just do it again to somebody else. But the legitimate organizations don't, that's not how they operate. And even the small group that I was looking at today on Facebook publicly showed the entire medical records of this cat. And we disclose that information. We know that information becomes public when we disclose it to another shelter partner or another rescue. And that's okay, because it's the part of the cat's record.
Transparency. And I think when they're shady, they don't want that transparency. They're going to try to blur it with something just to get you to pay out. That's basically what most scams are anyway.
One great way to tell if an adoption is going to be a scam or not, if it's like, say, if to transport the cat or dog to you across a distance, all you have to do is say, I'll be willing to come pick the dog or cat up. They're going to be wanting to fleece you on shipping fees and climate-controlled carriers, billing you for incrementally as they kind of hook you in. If you're going to come pick up the cat, there's no way they can scam you, because they're not going to invent fake shipping fees. They're not going to invent fake climate-controlled carriers. They'll go, no, we don't really need you to come pick the cat up.
Does an animal actually exist in those cases? Was there actually an animal?
Well, it might or it might not. It depends how that scam is set up. Some are set up by puppy mills. They're breeding badly bred animals and selling them for, they're pretending to be a charity, and they're creating a certain amount of money to get that animal, but there's something wrong with that animal. And that animal may in fact exist, but it's not the animal that you think you're getting. And then in other cases, the animal doesn't exist. I just want to mention another quick way with online scams to tell the difference between a legitimate organization and a scam. It's what I call what's on the left side of the @ sign in an email address and what's on the right side of the @ sign. So if the email address says, ASPCA adoptions @gmail.com or at Hotmail or at USA.com, it's not legitimate. If it's, something at ASPCA shipping.com, the ASPCA is not going to create a separate domain for their shipping department. It's going to be ASPCA.org, period. If it's not going to be DeltaAirlinesShipping.com. It's going to be Delta.com.
Yeah.
It might be shipping at Delta.com, but it would never be.
So
if you see anything funky on the right side of the @ sign that doesn't match up with the legitimate domain of that organization, you should run away. The first line of defense, and unfortunately, people just don't hear it in real time, is if someone says they've got a free puppy or kitten or a low-cost puppy or kitten, and it's a breed.
Oh, yeah.
There's no legitimate reason why someone's they say, oh, I'm moving. Oh, I'm allergic. Oh, I lost my job. Oh, whatever.
It's fake. Because everyone wants puppies and kittens, let alone pedigreed ones, because there's a huge market for pedigreed animals. Why would they give it to you for free?
Right. The problem is when people see the prize, the holy grail, their mind goes into this weird place where they no longer seem to be able to process information carefully. I'll give you a quick example in a different area. We have a lottery. Lots of cities and countries have lotteries. You play a number, you get a ticket, and if the number comes up, you get a payoff.
Yeah.
Place where you buy the ticket.
Right.
And they said, I want 646432760, whatever the number is. That was yesterday's winning number. They were there's no rule that says they can't play.
So what did they do?
A legitimate ticket with the winning number. The only thing that's wrong is the date.
Did they Photoshop?
They manipulate the date. They turn a 6 into an 8.
Oh,
They turn a 1 into a 7. But the ticket's real. It's 100% real. And the moment the person sees the winning number and they realize there's a $50 million payout, they've gone to La La Land.
Oh,
And then
jeez.
when the person says, I'm not a U.S. citizen, I'm at risk of being deported, just give me $50,000 and you can have the whole thing.
Oh, jeez. Okay, but
So,
just hold on. Give me one sec. One sec.
yeah, what a beautiful cat.
Okay, sorry. Going back to what you're saying.
What a beautiful cat.
Uh,
So when they see a breed,
yeah.
when they see a Scottish fold, a Sphinx, a Devon Rex, oh, that's the holy grail. That's the lottery ticket. And they don't process all those other things that are
It's the
wrong.
emotions, isn't it? It's either panic or infatuation. It's something with intense emotion. The reason why I just grabbed him when he was coming down, so his name is Professor Cortex. He's a Cornish Rex. He was abandoned at the age of 11 months old. And I hate to say this, but when his rescuer came to me, because I've known them for many years, they're not even a shelter. They're actually a pet groomer in the neighborhood that is known to be very benevolent. So people dump animals on them, knowing that they're not going to let them die. Long story short, people have a history of dumping cats and dogs in their place, saying, oh, I need to bathe my dog, I need to bathe my cat, but they never come back for them. So they're famous in our neighborhood for that. I helped them get rehomed to my personal friends, actually, and my relatives. And I've helped them rehome to, like, God, 24 cats. And he's one of them. And the reason why he stayed with me was I've never seen a Cornish Rex in my life. I don't know what they are. I'm not experienced with pedigreed cats. Most of my cats are just street cats, just normal tabbies.
Yep.
He's one of the 2 pedigreed ones at home. When he first came, I only told a few friends. I'm like, I got this curly-haired cat. He looks kind of funny, but he's got health issues. He's got IBD. So he was abandoned because he was pooping water. And the person would rather buy a new one than to treat him. That's why they abandoned him. But the hard part was because he was 11 months old, a purebred male still has secondhand value. The market value at that time, they said, was 20,000 Hong Kong dollars for an 11-month-old Cornish Rex because it was so rare in the market. So that's about 2,500 US. You can imagine, news got out there. I was just treating him for the IBD at home. Like, he was a foster at that time. And my phone started ringing because I told a few friends about him. I guess they must have shared the picture because he was so unique. And then people called me and they didn't even care about what his temperament was. They didn't even care about his history. They just asked, purebred, under 1 year old? I'll come pick him up right now. I was like, I didn't say he was for adoption. I don't even know who you are. Some even went as far as saying, oh, we'll give you like a lucky money, like the lucky money that we give in Chinese New Year. So it's to signify appreciation and good luck. We give it to people, sometimes when we adopt, just to say thank you. They're like, oh, we'll give you a red pocket for $3,000 or $5,000. I'm like, no, I don't want your red pocket. This guy is not for adoption. They're like, oh, that's fine. We can take him. But the fact that they don't ask anything else about him, it scares me. So I went back to them and I asked, is this an in-demand cat? They're like, yeah, we've got to tell you, you're going to get a lot of calls about this guy. But chances are they're not going to love him for who he is, so be careful.
Right. Great cats. We've had some Devon Rexes at our shelter. They're lovely cats. So sweet. I could tell you how that groomer could get less cats dumped on them. I'm not going to tell you on the show, but I could.
Please, because they are so well known for that, and they know that people know they have a soft heart, so they often get taken advantage of. They can afford it, but still, it's good to not have animals dumped on, right? Anyway, back to what we're saying. Now, ethical rescues. Can you actually break us down more in detail so we can learn about how the whole process is like, how these legitimate rescue operations function? Like the transparency, what kind of documentation are we expecting? What kind of process? What people ask us? What are we supposed to give? Can you kind of just walk us through that as if I'm somebody who's going into the shelter to adopt?
Sure. I can speak mostly about my own shelter. But it's pretty typical. And it's almost hard for me to answer your question because it's stuff I don't think about because it's just so second nature. It's like, oh, yeah, we do this and we do that. It starts with being an organization that in our case is brick and mortar. And by the way, people dump cats and dogs on us all the time. They just bring a cat in a box, set it down and walk or run away. Or they start talking to us and we're trying to ask for information about the cat history. And they say, no, I can't do that.
Why are they so reluctant? Is it because they don't want to get hated on?
It's a great question. They may be impatient. They may not really care about this cat or dog. They may feel that there's stigma attached to it. Technically, if you don't have an appointment to surrender your cat or dog with us, there's a $50 fee.
They just want to run off.
They don't want to pay the fee, and then they can run off. That's what they want to do. We can't really stop them.
Yeah.
But in any case, to your question about how it all works, we take cats and dogs. Half of the cats are strays. Half of them typically are surrendered by individuals. They come to us for all sorts of different reasons. A person may have died or go to a nursing home or may have been evicted from their apartment, may be going to a human shelter.
Right.
Unfortunately, in the US, at least in New York, human shelters don't accept pets. It's tragic.
Shelters don't
accept
Oh,
pets.
okay.
So if you are homeless and you have to go into a public subsidized shelter, even it might be a hotel, it might be a converted hotel, you can't bring your cat or dog with you.
A lot of homeless people actually have pets. Is support.
It's a disconnect that
Yeah.
I don't approve of and we're not happy about. Even emergency shelters in disasters have only recently, thinking of the Red Cross now is setting up shelters for people where they can bring their pets. But that's relatively new.
Yeah.
In any case, we take our cats in for all sorts of reasons, whether it's life events that happen to people or there's something about the cat, they can't afford medical treatment. So they surrender the cat to us. We take the history of that cat and we document it. The person fills out a form where they can say everything they know about the cat, what the cat likes, what food the cat likes, what their preferences are, how they react to strangers, how they react to children, how they react to dogs. And that becomes the known history. That known history is in the database for that cat for the rest of time. We take the cat in, there's an admissions process. The behavior team and I work for the feline behavior team. We start interacting with the cat on a daily basis and see if the cat is well adjusted enough that they don't need daily behavior work. They might just need daily care, cleaning, feeding, and socializing. They don't need specialized behavior care. And we do an assessment of that cat and dog. We do a behavior assessment on day 3. We examine the cat on a number of different ways for their behavior, how they react to being pet, to accepting handling and being picked up, and are they affectionate or are they more independent? All those sorts of things. And then we give them a behavior rating, a grade, which simply is a number. It's 1, 2, 3, or 4 typically. And that tells us how experienced the home should be. A 1 person needs no experience. The cat is just very easy, a beginner cat. A 3 or a 4 is a cat who needs a very experienced home to handle a more significant behavior problem. But it's not a grade results in euthanasia because we don't euthanize cats for behavior. It's just a way of helping to channel that cat for the next part of its life. They go on the website, they become available for adoption. People apply to adopt that cat. They come in and meet the cat. They meet the adoption staff, fill out an application, and we take them through that process. The cat also gets a medical exam. All the animals get a medical exam by a licensed veterinarian. That entire medical history, including any follow-up care that we give that cat or dog, becomes a part of that cat's record. The testing, the procedures that we do, surgeries that we do, the spay neuter, it all becomes a comprehensive record that stays with the animal forever. Even after adoption, we keep that record in place. And we charge a small fee for this. And that's, and then there's other divisions of the organization. We have a community cat program where we have cats who actually do well outdoors, believe it or not. And that it can be part of a trap, neuter, return program, TNR program, where they are able to live in a colony outdoors. We have a foster program and we have a volunteer program and other programs that are all part of the organization.
Wow. See, that's the kind of structure that I think even the smaller sanctuaries can use. I think, as you said, is pretty standard in the big ones, but unfortunately, the smaller ones, still all over the place. But I think it's a good guideline for first-time adoption parents to know what to expect, even if it's a smaller place, so that if anything is iffy or if it starts to follow a pattern that makes us suspect, then that's when we should really think about it. So I think that's a great way to start.
If I could give two quick pieces of advice for a small rescue that's starting out or has started out and doesn't want to get into trouble. So the two things I would highly recommend are, if you're going to get veterinary care from a veterinarian who's going to give you low cost and maybe allow you to run up a bill that you pay off later, don't do it. Because what will happen is take advantage of that, because they're offering you a loan, essentially. You will keep racking up vet bills and you won't be paying them off. Then all of a sudden, you'll be deeply in debt and the organization's financial livelihood is now threatened. Either you have to do something very dramatic and hard to do to pay off that debt, or the vet quits on you and you have no vet care. So pay your bills. Be mindful of your care capacity. In other words, how many cats you can actually take good and humane care of, such that you don't take in too many. And if you take in cats who have special needs, which is fine, it's a wonderful thing to do, they will be harder to adopt. They will be slower to adopt. And if you're a foster-based rescue, you've got 30 homes and each home takes a cat. If you keep putting harder to adopt cats into those homes, the available homes that you have for the cats that are easier to adopt gets lower until you run out.
Oh, yeah.
And all you've got are hard to adopt cats in homes where they're stuck. So you have to find a balance between the harder to adopt and the easier to adopt, lest you run out of care capacity.
Yeah.
It is a challenge, because ethically you want to take every animal brought to you. But if you're completely indiscriminate, you will end up not functioning and your mission will fail.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, in Hong Kong, we see some where they follow that pattern. They've offended everybody. They're in debt. The homes that are letting them foster no longer wants to talk to them, because every time they go to them, they have things they can't get rid of as fosters. They're like, there's fosters and there's permanent fosters for horny cats. And they see a pattern and they're like, no, we're not going to pick up their calls anymore. So we've seen those.
One of the reasons for transparency is the understanding and the recognition by animal welfare organizations that you exist within, you're part of the fabric of the community. If you violate that trust, you're no longer a part of the community and you are kicked out.
And you know what happens to those? They move to a different community. We see that all the time. Hong Kong's not that big. We're only like, I think, 1,100 square kilometers? We're not that big. Once they've ruined it for that community, they've used up social reputation, they move to another place and do the same thing. But then the thing is, how sustainable is that? Because there's only so many places you can go to, right?
Right.
It's not sustainable. So please don't do that. Another thing I want to ask about is, with shelters, I understand that they take in all sorts of animals, the ones that people don't want, and maybe the animal's parents died, or it could be a raid in a hoarding situation, all sorts of stuff. But as we said earlier, statistically, there's a variety, and there's healthy ones, there's unhealthy ones, right? Can you go a little bit into the difference between an urgent case as opposed to an urgent case that is dropped on somebody? For example, if someone goes to you guys to shelter and say, hey, this dog got ran over by the car, that's urgent. But you will not use that as a direct ready for adoption dog. Usually you get them treated first. And after they recover, the adoption process starts. Or if there's something that requires long-term care, that will be transparent. And then that's up to the adopter to decide whether or not they want them. Correct?
So yeah, it sounds like you're talking about the thing that some organizations or fake organizations do, which is they create a sense of emergency.
Ooh.
We need,
Right.
here are a couple things that can happen. If there's an animal, let's just say a cat, who's very sick, such that they probably won't get adopted by someone who walks in off the street. That cat could be made available through our New Hope program, which is we have a program where we have shelter partners. These are shelters and rescues that go through an application process with us, very rigorous application process. We know that they're legitimate. They're within a couple 100 miles of New York City, and they get registered with us. And that's transparent. If you go to our website, acc.org, I mentioned nycacc.app, that's the adoptions page. But the whole organization is represented at ORG. We list all of our shelter partners. It's public knowledge. That's not a secret. But we will replace cats and dogs with shelter partners who have medical urgencies because we know that cat or dog, needs additional treatment and can't be adopted to a person who's just not going to come in off the street and say they want to pay this money. But we don't take that animal and say, please come adopt. You're going to need to spend. No, it doesn't happen that way. Or the cat or dog is rehabilitated in our shelters. The cost of that medical care is not built into the adoption fee. It's $25 for a senior cat, it's $75 for an adult, and $125 for a kid.
Pedigreed or not, doesn't matter.
Pedigreed or not. Some pedigreed cats get what's called a staff adoption, which just means that staff members see that cat and they're like, I want that cat. But that's the only difference.
Wow. See, that's something that I think to the audience, if this is your first time adopting, if you're thinking about going to smaller shelters or even just personal adoptions, please make sure that you look for these signs. Nobody's really going to adopt out something that is bloody and still gooey, literally just off the ER. It's unorthodox and not good for the animal. It should be in care. And yeah, this is where transparency is. So as tear-jerking, as panicky as it is, that does not happen. Another thing I want to talk about that also is very tear-jerking, very urgent, I'm sure something you're very familiar with, is puppy mills and disaster response efforts. Can you tell us a little bit about how those work? The reason I'm shifting to this is not everybody helps animals from just adopting from the shelter. They might want to support either by volunteering or donating to what's happening behind the scenes. Adopters just see what's presented to us, be it online or offline, but we don't know what happens, how they're acquired and stuff like that. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you've done with hoarders, puppy mills, disaster response? What is it like?
So it's a great and complicated question. It actually goes back to we had a hurricane, a typhoon in the Eastern Hemisphere, a really bad hurricane years ago called Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. It was a very uncoordinated response by emergency response organizations. It was one of the largest disasters we had, and the U.S. was not prepared. We have an organization called FEMA Emergency Management, worked with lots of state and local organizations that was uncoordinated. And out of that came a whole new way of looking at disasters and organization called the Incident Command System. And it is a way of thinking about and organizing disaster response that is extremely organized. And I became certified on several different incident command system courses on how to effectively function. When I worked for the field investigation and response team at ASPCA, everybody goes through the incident command training system. In a disaster, if you have more than X number of people reporting to you, you will not maintain control of those people. And so it was a recognition of how much can any individual take on and what a coordinated response looks like. I worked on lots of cases. I remember a case in North Carolina where every county is supposed to have a shelter. A county is like a prefecture or a territory. It's bigger than a town. It's a block of land that is 20 miles by 20 miles.
Okay.
Every county in the U.S. is supposed to have an open admission shelter where you can bring your animal. And this county didn't have one. So they went to a puppy mill, a woman who ran a dog hoarding organization, and they gave her money and said, you are now the county shelter, except it was not.
And they did do their homework. It's no plot.
I'm not sure the county cared. They just wanted to comply with state law.
What?
And so they gave her a bunch of money, which she spent on nothing good. A volunteer videotaped her punching a dog in the face. And then the county has its own police force in the US. They're called the Sheriff's Department. It has a British history. But they couldn't go to the Sheriff's Department because the sheriff is part of the county.
Oh, no.
But the organization, and I put organization in finger quotes, happened to be just over straddling the city line under the authority of the local city. So the local city police went in and did the raid,
Ah,
took possession, put police on the ground, and then we came in and provided all the care needed for 400 dogs that were not being cared for. I've been to all sorts of cases, and I'm actually trying to get back to your question about, remind me a little bit about what we were talking
your
about.
experience in handling the puppy mills, the hoarding cases, and the disaster response efforts. So we kind of know what's happening in the background because we always just see the tip of the iceberg when they're presented to us, right? We don't know what.
Right. So we did not allow local volunteers to come in because we never knew if the local volunteers weren't in some way related to the people who were being charged criminally with the activity.
Oh, that's right.
We did lots of dogfighting cases. Dogfighting is now a federal crime.
Is that a thing in the States?
Oh, yeah.
Them or something?
People bet on them. And
Oh.
a lot of money. And the FBI started getting interested in the dogfighting cases that we were pursuing because it seems that people who fight dogs also typically have lots of guns and drugs.
Oh.
If they cross state lines with a dog, they've now broken other laws. So we would often get the FBI's involvement in these cases, and the county police would be involved as well. The people would be arrested. You can actually go to jail for several years if you are involved in dogfighting. Unfortunately, there are a lot of other cruelty laws that you can break and you don't face much in the way of jail time. However, we still take possession of the animals and shelter them. We create a custom shelter. We take over an abandoned warehouse that's available for rent and turn it into a shelter at a non-disclosed location. The government knows where we are. The criminals don't know where we are. We provide veterinary care and daily care for these animals. Eventually, we have an adoption event where once we get legal custody, we don't have complete legal custody at the beginning because the defendants haven't been found guilty.
Oh, it's still their dog.
It's still their dogs. So this is the way it works. They're in this location where the criminals don't know where we are, and we have people present all the time.
Right.
What we do is 6 months or a year later, when it's finally time to go to court, the courts move slowly in the U.S.
Of course,
right?
of course.
We go to the defendant and we say, either you can sign over custody of all the dogs to us or all the cats to us right now, or you can pay the vet bills. And we set down what is typically $1 million. It's $1 million a year to provide for medical and sheltering care for several hundred animals.
Can they go to you and say, we never want them treated? Can they say that?
In the case, will absolutely allow for the humane care. We may not be able to do everything. We might not be able to spay or neuter them until we have legal custody. But all the daily care, all the emergency care, all the standard care that they need because if they were sick, we're allowed to do. And then we hand the bill over to the defendant and say, you can pay it or you can give us the animal. And guess what they do? They sign right there on the dotted line. Of course, right? And then we can get them all spayed and neutered. And I have a question about that for you, by the way. It was a terrible tornado in Joplin, Missouri in 2011 and represented my personal shift from volunteer work to paid work. This tornado killed several hundred people, destroyed the entire town, and left 1,200 cats and dogs homeless. Well, and when we held the adoption event, 6,000 people showed up from 20 states to attend a 2-day adoption event, Saturday and Sunday. Every dog and cat was adopted on Saturday. There were no dogs and cats left for Sunday. So we had to go to other shelters in Missouri and bring their cats and dogs to us so that we could have more to adopt on Sunday.
Wow.
Again, that's just the typical example of what might happen. But we're providing all the daily care. It's very expensive. A typical case might have 50 people, whether they're volunteers or staff. They have to fly out. They don't live in the town where the case transpired.
Yeah.
They have to be flown out. We have to be fed and put in hotels. I remember a vet friend of mine at the start of this 400 dog case had to order enough PCR tests and similar medical equipment to deal with the testing, deworming, and vaccinating of 400 dogs. She spent $200,000 before the first dog walked in the door. Well, very expensive. And really only national organizations, there's Humane Society of the United States, there's ASPCA's examples. They're the ones that have the financial reach. And they do advertisements on television where they show puppies and kittens in sad conditions because they're trying to get donations to offset the costs of these operations, but they're at least legitimate organizations raising money for legitimate costs.
There's a lot of charitable people in this world, and I think we have no problem doing charity. It's just that we want to make it goes to the right hands. I think that's the biggest problem that people have. And back to what you're saying, I remember I was hearing some cases in Hong Kong. People can leave their house and leave their dogs, and they immigrate. So they left the country when they found the microchip and the rabies tag in these dogs, because in Hong Kong, it's mandated for dogs to be chipped and have the rabies tag, not for cats, but for dogs. And they tracked the owner and called them up and said, "Did you just abandon your dog?" They're like, "No, we just left it there, and we were gonna come back in 3 years." And you still can't do anything to them legally because it's only hypothetical that something would happen. Because until it actually happens, you can say for sure the dog would die in 3 years. But it's a gray area. They'll be like, "No, we're gonna come back and claim it."
If you abandoned your child in the same circumstances, that law will be broken at that point.
Yeah, of course.
All you have to do is apply the same standard to animals. One of the things, that I think is true cross-culturally is something that is true historically in the United States, is the legal status of pets has gone through an evolution in the 1800s. There was a case where a guy accused another guy of stealing his cat. The judge said, "You can't steal someone's cat. Cats aren't pets."
Oh.
Well, that's changed.
Are they seen as property in states right now?
They are still seen as property, but they absolutely are seen as property. But there was a time they weren't even seen as property. Then the question is, how do you raise them up beyond just property like a suitcase or a computer and turn them into a sentient and feeling creature that deserves more than how you would just treat a suitcase or a book?
Yeah.
And for us, it starts with farm animals. If you can do something to a farm animal, it's hard to make the logical case that you can't do that to a dog or a cat. One of the ways in which we improve the rights of dogs and cats is we raise up the rights of farm animals. If we say you're no longer legally allowed a bull without pain medication, then you can't say it's okay to do that to a dog. Raise the ethics and protections for animals, raise up their protections in farm animals so that you can't be saying, well, if you can do it to a pig, well, you can do, what's the difference? Pig, dog?
Yeah, that's really interesting. That the line starts to blur somewhere and people are like, "Then why are you eating animals?" Like that kind of conversation would start to happen. But in Hong Kong, they're still seen as property. We do have animal laws here, but unfortunately, they're really not that enforced. I've seen cases where the guy was caught red-handed, snapping pigeons. Like just go up to the pigeon, just snap them, toss them back into the bushes just for fun. They caught him red-handed, even have footage, and slap on the wrist. Nothing. So I'm like, wow, that's really weird. Same thing with Hong Kong. Not farm animals, but wild animals. Wild boars here. If you report seeing them, the Department of Fisheries and Agriculture will just kill them, just right on the spot. Like if they're so villainized here, it's weird. I guess it's different in different countries. There's a lot of things in Hong Kong we can work on in terms of that because we don't have many farmed animals. A lot of our meat is actually imported because Hong Kong is too small, but it's more like wildlife. They don't get what they deserve. So that's something that we have to work on. But other than protecting the animals, let's shift a little and come back to protecting the human. right? Because we need to protect ourselves to protect them. This is where I want to go into one of our last points. Our regulations might be different, but as we have this conversation, we'll start to see the red flags. We touch on some of them. Some shelters, you never see the animals. They probably not even a shelter. They totally exist. They're just photos. What you said, if it's something you see on a social media post versus a legitimate website, that's something we can look for. Hoarders that are disguised as rescues, like what you were saying in some of your raids. Another one I wanted to point out is when the shelter or the rescue keeps having the same animals over and over again. It's almost like they don't get new ones, but they don't get rid of them either. Do you ever see those on like websites or socials or in any promotes?
Every organization has a different definition of what's a long stay animal. What constitutes an animal who's been with us for a long time? Some organizations will have cats or dogs for years.
Mm.
Our definition of a long stay animal is 30 days. If a cat or dog has been us with for 30 days, it's considered a long stay. And it gets more priority. We start prioritizing that cat or dog to bring attention to it. We don't recycle dogs and cats.
Exactly. They may
Right.
be long stays.
They may be long stays, and some organizations may have very long stays, but there's no recycling. And eventually they get placement. We figure something out.
They go somewhere.
They go somewhere. So yeah, I'm not aware of that.
There's more that we see on the internet now. They have a pool of animals. It's always the same ones. They just take different pictures of them.
Aren't they concerned that people are going to recognize they're just recycling?
It's actually not that easy. I don't know if you've seen some, this is for animal sales. Have you seen the posts where people thought they bought like a pedigree dog and it turned out after they wash it, it's just a mutt that was colored and permed and trimmed? It wasn't.
I've not personally seen that. Doesn't surprise me. Oh, it's crazy.
They could dramatically change the way that they look. But the wounds or the amputations are still there. Today's an amputated poodle, tomorrow's an amputated mutt. Today's a white dog, tomorrow's a brown dog. It's really weird, but you do see that here from time to time. And another one is always the sick ones and the vulnerable ones that you see, and it's always those that are asking for large sums of money, or that's the only ones that they ever adopt out. I think that's a huge red flag too.
Absolutely.
And
yeah, asking for lots of money is always, the other thing, in some ways, the best way not to get scammed is never do an internet search on free or low cost puppies, kittens, dogs, or cats, or breeds. Just don't search for it. You're looking for the wrong thing. It doesn't exist because they're either not healthy or their behavior is problematic or both. And you shouldn't do the search in the first place.
Yeah, and usually with the free ones, I think some of the money grabs people can do is transport. Or when they ask, this is the amount of money we spent here, why did you pay for everything? Or I think some of them, it's not that, but they're just purely using sympathy. They're like, oh, we're a small shelter because we spent our life savings or next month rent on this. Do you want us to close down? It's almost like emotional blackmail sometimes. It's very hard for us to do this. It's like, oh, we're really good people. Are you not supporting us? I don't think shelters actually say things like that.
It would make more sense and be kinder to provide support for well-run organizations that are doing the good work in a good way than supporting an organization that is failing. Maybe that organization shouldn't exist anymore. Maybe you're just throwing money at a bad situation and being guilt is a terrible thing to use in animal welfare. And and people, use the term forever home.
Yeah.
And guilt you into not returning an animal if it's not working out. But a reputable organization should be willing to take that animal back without pressure and provide an alternative for you as a member of the community. Hopefully it's going to say good things about you. They took my cat back. My child was deathly allergic, had asthma, and they took the cat back. They're a lovely organization. That's what you want to have happen.
Yeah, I say that to some people who just dump animals. I sometimes say, you know what? These people don't deserve being that cat or dog or that animal's owner. Sometimes it's actually giving the animal an opportunity to find a better home. It's better than them just abusing them all their lives and just hating them and taking on the animal, right? Or if their living condition is not great, if their health is failing, their finances are not there, it's actually not good. So sometimes we kind of have to take that into consideration too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And two more things I wanted to mention. One, I mentioned already, the fast pace, the emotional element on steroids. Watch out for those because shelters will tell you the urgency of the situation, but it's not an animal that you can adopt yet. And they're not going to ask you for money. It's something to look for.
Yep.
And the last one is some very recent one I just saw. There's a shelter that got busted. It turned out they use the same scheme over and over again. It's for dogs and puppies. They always say, if not adopted by this hour on this day, they will be slaughtered. And they use terminology like that too. And I'm like, wait a minute, why is it so strict? It's always a 2-3 day deadline whenever they post these things out, even for kill shelters. Is that window that? It's usually 2 days. When you see these rescues post, it's never anything with a longer period. Even when people ask, like I remember a friend who says she's willing to take the 3 puppies, but she's not in Hong Kong until 3 days later and asks, can you put it in a hotel or something? We're willing to pay for it, but we just can't come until 3 days. They're like, no, gonna slaughter them 48 hours or never. And then they start to ask for money.
Right. So again, the money is the tip off that there's something wrong, but there is a nuanced answer. At least with my organization, I want to explain so that there's some education on this topic.
Okay.
We have something called the at-risk list.
Okay.
This means at risk for euthanasia.
Hmm.
The risk is because either a dog has behavior that's very challenging, or there's a medical concern with the dog or cat that is very challenging. After much consideration and work, the cat or dog gets listed on the at-risk list. That is a 3-day list. The urgency is not that we just compress the time to get results. It's we've run out of time and we're now giving awareness to this dog or cat who's reached a stage where something has to happen. However, doesn't mean that euthanasia is what's going to happen. It's at risk of. It doesn't mean it's for certain. And a dog or a cat can be relisted again for another 3 days if no one takes that cat or dog. Sometimes not, but oftentimes they are. In the spirit of transparency, people want to know. There are people who watch that list. They are kind and caring members of the community, and they want to do what's called full animals that are at risk. And they watch the list. And if a dog or cat goes off the list, they become very concerned that the cat or dog was euthanized if it didn't say adopted.
Yeah.
So we have a follow-up. Part of our website shows you the outcome of every single dog or cat that goes on the at-risk list. It says euthanized for medical concerns, euthanized for behavior, placed with a New Hope partner, adopted, relisted. All of those outcomes are public knowledge. And if you want to have the trust of your community, to know that if you're taking one of these animals, that there are alternative outcomes, if you want to know that the outcomes, even the bad outcomes, are real, then you need to be transparent about what happens. Unfortunately, there are some organizations that advertise our at-risk animals and put in their statement on Facebook, midnight on Friday or 6 p.m. on Friday, if this dog or cat doesn't get pulled out of the shelter, it will be euthanized, even though the truth is it may not be euthanized. And they will say, I need X amount of money in order to pull this dog out. And they demonize us.
They monetize it.
They call us the kill shelter, the house of death, the death house. And their funding model requires that we be the bad guys, even though we're actually trying to do everything we can on behalf of this dog or cat.
Wow, that's so evil.
So they are actually trading on the work that we're doing, and we can't stop them. If they pull the dog or cat, then we lose control over what happens. So we have to be careful about who is actually trying to get this dog or cat. Even with legitimate organizations, there's the potential for abuse of the system. In other words, gaming the system. That 2-day, 3-day thing may or may not be a reality. It depends on the organization. But if there's no transparency, then you don't know.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Now that you mentioned that, it reminds me of another pattern that I see in Hong Kong. The illegitimate, shadier shelters, they get into this positive loop, the opposite of what you just suffered there. Like, you guys were taken advantage of, and the picture her use, you guys are villainized. They got monetized. Whereas the ones that I'm talking about, adopt out, the problematic ones, cash in on it. And one of the prerequisites is they ask the adoption parents to do a number of social media posts to praise their greatness. And they must do it as part of the adoption protocol. Not one post, but a bunch. So to the naked eye, these people look so benevolent that they're like, look, we even got these really injured ones adopted. We found these good Samaritans, but we are the ones that handle the difficult cases. Come to us. Give us the vulnerable ones. We'll take care of it. So you can imagine they'll get an unlimited supply of these really hard to handle ones that shouldn't even be in their possession or get adopted out immediately, because that's not what people do. And it's not good for the animals. But to the naked eye, it looks like they have that crown of being the good guy, and they'll get the unlimited supply. It's horrible. We don't know how to stop those.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, did you see?
I do.
There's up there. It's one of his favorite spots. It's the t-shirt hammock. Okay, wait, we just fixed my camera. So it's my background, always moving. It's like very dynamic.
It's very exciting. I've been watching all of your cats running around. It's so much fun.
They love it. That's only part of my house. Oh, there's one back here. Oh,
yeah, right. Yeah, it's great.
Is this my second pedigree cat, by the way? From the same place that Professor Cortex came from. She was deemed as aggressive. It turned out that she wasn't. She's just a scary cat. Misunderstood. Level 1, labeled as level 4.
But just to say one last thing, the biggest point I want to make is that all of the good things that come out of animal welfare are connected between animal welfare's connection to the community.
Yes.
And transparency and being a good neighbor and an ethical, humane friend of animals and friend to the people. It's not just animals in a vacuum. And again, distinguishing between those two groups is where it's tricky, obviously.
I think you mentioned a very good point. It's almost like a social ledger when you're in a community. You can't lie for too long. For example, if I accuse you of abusing cats, people in the community would know because you're part of it. It's hard for you to pretend if you are, and vice versa, right? Like you could put on a front for so long, but if everyone knows you, then you just got to ask a few people around. Just like before we started, in the community that's affected by local scammers, just go into any shop. You could probably find one in every 2 shop. People are unwilling to speak up publicly because it's just a community. When you knock on a few doors, you'll start to know. Let's end on a more encouraging note so that for people who's listening or watching, they know how to do the right thing or inspire others to do the right thing, because that's very important. That's all we could do. Create awareness and encourage the ones that want to do good, right? I know that you do stuff in Chernobyl, and we only touched on it just a little bit before we started. Would you like to tell us about your work with the Chernobyl dogs?
There was a hurricane in New York a number of years ago, Hurricane Sandy, and I met a veterinarian who was visiting. It was part of an organization donating vet services. We became good friends. She later became the medical director of the Dogs of Chernobyl program. If you Google Dogs of Chernobyl, it's to the cleanfutures.org website, the umbrella organization that manages this program. And she became the medical director. And I said, I'd like to come out and do one of these campaigns. She said, sure. At the time, I was full-time with another organization. I couldn't go. And at around that time, they stopped taking volunteers who applied to the program. They had an application process. There were people who were faking being trained animal welfare professionals because they wanted to go to Chernobyl and retrieve radioactive artifacts. They're what's called radiation nerds, rad nerds. They wanted
to collect these items that are infected with radiation.
That's all they wanted, was to obtain artifacts from Pripyat, which is the abandoned town outside of the plant. They were discovered because they couldn't fake it. They were sent home. So they were faking it and they were discovered. They were sent home. And then the year that I was going to join, it became by invitation only. So there even are scams for fake volunteers to go to foreign countries to do benevolent work.
What?
So I went freelance again, and I was able to get on the next trip, which was in May of 2019. And then I got another full-time job with the animal care centers where I am now. I went to my new employer and said, I know I can't really ask this of you. I just joined your organization, but in 2 months, I'm supposed to go to Chernobyl for a few weeks to do spay-neuter research work. Could you let me go? And they talked about it at senior leadership, and they said, sure, you're going to have to use your vacation time and paid time off. You can do it, provided you come back and give a presentation to the organization. So I recorded videos and photos, and I created a big PowerPoint with all this interesting stuff, and I gave the presentation, and then I forgot about it. After that, later during COVID, I started giving webinars on cat behavior, which I still do. Any organization that wants me, including yours, if you want, I do an hour of cat behavior discussion with Q&A. I realized I could give the Chernobyl discussion as well. And so I still give that discussion through NGOs and public libraries and other organizations that want it. And I present it. Community spay-neuter veterinary services for the town where all the workers now live who go to Chernobyl every day to be in the process of mothballing the other 3 plants. There were actually 4 nuclear power plants in Chernobyl. We did spay and neutering and veterinary services for both owned cats and dogs and community dogs and cats that lived outside. Then we went to Chernobyl in the exclusion zone and we did spay neuter. We also gave ear tags to the dogs that had a built-in dosimeter so we could track the radiation the dogs were absorbing over time. The tags identified the dogs to plant workers who, if a plant worker had been bitten by a dog, wouldn't know if that dog had been vaccinated for rabies or not. Now they knew. We traveled on this special train with special permits that would get us there every day. And we would do all of this work. We learned a lot. We had researchers with us who produced papers that have now been published in major research periodicals, as well as disseminated in publications for the public, and talked about what we discovered. As an example, there's strontium in all the dogs' bones. We learned that many of the dogs did, in fact, descend from the pets left behind in 1986, but not all of them are descended from the pets. And we learned that there were social groups among the dogs where they never crossbreed. We would see dogs that would stop in a field and not move any farther. The dogs recognized that they were at the boundary of their social territory, and they would turn around. There was the capture team. They would help find the dogs and bring them to our clinic, who would sleep in the town square in Chernobyl City. They would sleep in the town square for a few nights. And every night, hundreds of dogs would come out of the forest, gather in the town square, and collectively howl.
What?
We're not sure, but we think it was either for their common defense against wolves. Safe. It's a dangerous area out there, and dogs are killed by predation, disease, and conditions. So it might have been for protection. We don't exactly know.
Interesting.
But there was a lot of interesting things done. There were at least 34 dogs brought back to the United States and Canada. And every one of those adopters submitted a blood sample to the National Institute of Health for DNA sequencing and long-term study. We're now able to study these dogs as they grow into old age. In Chernobyl, they don't typically live past about the age of 4 or 5 because the conditions are so harsh. The Chernobyl exclusion zone is the only known closed outdoor group of dogs in the world. It's completely closed to the outside. There's no interbreeding with dogs from a different area. And it's self-perpetuating until now that we've gotten the spay-neutering under control. So provided an area of study that was really unique. And now there are enough of them that are spayed and neutered that the population will remain in place until the population dwindles over time.
Wow, that's actually a really interesting initiative. When you said they're secluded, is it because it's fenced off, or is it just naturally it kind of creates?
It's naturally secluded because there is just for many, many, many miles. There's just nothing around but forest.
Huh. Is that weird how some things just kind of found a way naturally by accident? It's amazing. And it sounds like there's a lot of stories that could be told from that story and from the Chernobyl work that you did. I think we should do a separate podcast on that. I'll interrogate you further on the ins and outs of that one.
Happy to, and I can present photos and videos that won't be seen anywhere else.
Oh, that is wonderful. A lot of people know about that area and some of the dogs that got adopted, but I don't think many people actually talk about what was involved. People only see the outcome, but they don't really know the stuff that's happening in the background. I always wanted to show that.
There are still scams involved with the dogs from Chernobyl. There are people who say, I have a Chernobyl dog. I will adopt this dog to you for a fee.
They're worth something?
They're pretending to have a Chernobyl dog, a rescue from Chernobyl.
No, but wait, that's worth something? Like people want a Chernobyl dog?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Why?
Because they can say, look, I've got a Chernobyl dog. I've rescued the Chernobyl.
Come on. Oh, come on. Are you serious now?
I'm 100% serious.
How could people tell? Do they look different?
Typically, the Chernobyl dogs either look like German Shepherds or they look like sheep dogs, cattle dogs.
Yeah, dog and cat.
Of course they could. But they don't come out. Other than the 34 that we were given permission to transport out of Chernobyl, that's it. There are no other dogs. There are no dogs available. If you are thinking of adopting a Chernobyl dog and you're right now talking to someone about a Chernobyl dog, I promise you, you are not.
How old are these
100%.
Chernobyl dogs now? The 34 that got adopted.
Well, the first year that we were allowed to, we couldn't do it the first year of 2017 before I was involved. It was 2018 was the first year we could bring dogs out. So that was 6 years ago. And these dogs were typically puppies at the time. So they're probably in the range of 5, 6, maybe 7.
That's what makes me angry is that these bad players find all sorts of ways to integrate scams into the world of animal loving people. And then when we have these conversations like, what, Chernobyl dog scam? Are you serious?
There are other scams too. There's the blue dogs of Chernobyl, and you can see photoshops of dogs that are blue. And there are people who think that these are dogs that are blue because of something connected to radiation. It's crazy.
And they use that to ask for money?
Oh, I don't know what they use that for, but there's all sorts of conspiracy. I think in some ways the antidote to scams and stupid, junky stuff is the connection. Meet somebody, talk to someone in person.
Yeah.
You know, don't just rely on that name that's floating out there in the universe as a thing.
Of course. And transparency, it shows over time. You can't lie forever,
Right.
especially at this day and age. People find out. While you shared that, let me share a happy adoption story that that I encountered. It's not so much a rescue, but I think you actually saw a little bit of her earlier. Bucky. So she's an example.
Oh, yes.
Yes, she's an example of what is a successful adoption or permanent foster from a legitimate shelter. So she was one of the cats from Paws Guardian, which is quite a big shelter in Hong Kong. For cats, they generally have like a network of volunteers that they approve of, and then they stay in our house. And what happens was that she was abandoned without much medical history and survived gallbladder removal surgery. And here's the biggest difference for the audience. If you think, you know, there's shelters out there that adopt out animals that need long-term care, some of them, most of them, the legitimate ones, will be transparent about their condition once they find out. In my case, they didn't know because it was just dumped to them. So we took her for an examination to find that she has a bunch of problems. Her gallbladder stones were overwhelming. The shelter actually offered to pay for the surgery. It's not always the case, but I thought it was amazing that they offered to do it, which revived my faith in humanity a little bit. If you're transparent about it, that's great. But they did the extra step of offering to pay for it. I wasn't expecting that because her bills were crazy. It's about $20,000 US.
And she's so adorable. She looks so curious. She's like looking with her one eye, you know, you're holding her out.
She lost her eyes in a young age, so she's coping with it really well. When people are out there to do good, they're not going to give you trouble and dump an unknown burden to you. They'll tell you what it is. Whether or not you take it is never going to be the case where they dump it onto you, give you panic, give you this crazy deadline and ask you to pay up. It's never going to be like that. And that's where I want to end with an initiative that I started. It's not a charity, nothing to do with money. It's just a coalition for information sharing. It's a global coalition. It's called lovepetswisely.org. It's going to be launched by the time this video is out. It's the global coalition for people to share the latest news on what scams look like and be aware of it. Because we know that a lot of these scammers are very good with playing in that gray area. It's good to protect the humans and the animals so that we know when these things creep up, be it adoption scams or fake photos. Scams ask for the same thing, right? If it's not personal information, it's money. It's one way or the other. So that's what it's for. So everyone stay tuned for that. And yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for being on this with me. I know it's a really long conversation and we can probably go on for like half a day. Oh, there goes my light. But the light tells me that this is, say the universe is telling me.
That's hysterical.
That's a wrap for today. Thank you so much. I would love to invite you back for our future conversations when it comes to other rescue work, say with Chernobyl, cat behavior topics, and even just with charities or shelter related topics. Hopefully we can invite you back in the future.
Of course.
Thank you so much, everyone. Stay compassionate, stay safe. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And as I said, all of Stephen's information, his socials is going to be in the description. So everyone,
Can I
please do
bring up the
follow.
plug for Happy Consultants? My pick, right?
Oh, yes, please do. Please do. What's Happy Comes Home?
I'm sorry?
Would you like to tell us a few lines about what Happy Comes Home is about?
So it's about a family that goes to a shelter looking to adopt a cat. The child thinks this cat is going to be all these wonderful things, but they get the cat home and it's just a catastrophe. And so they have to search for someone who understands cat behavior. In walks Mr. Top Cat, who's a human-sized cat who looks a little bit like me and proceeds to help the cat be the happiest cat ever. It all works out in the end. Everybody's happy, including Happy the cat.
Everyone is happy. Happy's right there.
That's great.
We're happy. So I'm like, wow, the universe lined us up for the right reason. You have a book on Happy and I have Happy in my house right now. Wow. Perfect. Thank you so much. I'll put the link to that in the description as well. If any one of you have children, want to have a nice storybook to read for the bedtime stories, you know where to look. So that's a wrap for today. Thanks again, Stephen. I'll see you again in no time. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much.